Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. So, as rumors continue to churn online for a new Nintendo Switch-based console, yet another patent surfaced online signifying that Nintendo is indeed interested in a promising new technology that could significantly improve their graphics, their performance, as well as their technical capability. Now, this is not the first time that we've seen Nintendo have interest in this technology either. So we'll dive into all of that and what it could possibly mean here in just a little bit. Also, in an increasingly digital-only gaming landscape, Sony announced some bad news that has some fans just a little bit concerned about the future of their quote-unquote owned digital library. Yeah, this is not necessarily a good sign, especially when you have consoles like the PlayStation 5 Digital Edition, so make sure to stay tuned for all of that as well. First though, let's go over some of the quick news, starting off with Hypercharge Unboxed. Now, we talked about this game earlier this week as it surprisingly went viral ahead of its Xbox release. And that is the thing about this game, because Hypercharge has been available on other platforms since 2020. You can actually play this game right now on the Nintendo Switch or PC, which makes its sudden explosion of popularity even more interesting. It just kind of shows you that when you release your game on other platforms, that's yet another opportunity to really take off, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. The Xbox community is absolutely embracing Hypercharge Unboxed, so much so that the developer has now confirmed that in just over 1 week, 30,000 people have already joined their Xbox sign-up page. Now, that was actually as of a few days ago, so I'm sure that they've gotten a lot more since then, but that does go to show you this sudden burst of interest in this game. Even Cory Barlog, the director over at Sony Santa Monica, is now following their Twitter feed, so it really is cool to see a game like this just kind of bounce back here. Prior to the Xbox sign-up announcement, the highest concurrent player count on Steam is less than 1,000 players. With it coming to Xbox though, and all the traction that it's gained here recently, there's a good chance that might dramatically improve when it launches on Xbox later this year. It has been very well received on Steam, with 91% of all reviews recommending it, and I've seen several fans kind of claim that Hypercharge is now getting the recognition that it truly deserves. So definitely keep your eyes on this very cool looking game that brings toys to life in these spectacular, larger than life environments. Also, the NACON Connect 2022 showcase just happened yesterday, where they gave us updates on several games such as gameplay for The Lord of the Rings Gollum. We also got an update for Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. Session Skate Sim made an appearance here, among various other games. I will leave a recap in the description below if you want to go check out the entire showcase, but the two big surprise announcements here were for brand new games being a new Robocop game and then Terminator. Yeah, you 80s and 90s kids out there are probably pretty happy right now, but these announcements just kind of came out of nowhere, and at least in terms of Robocop Rogue City, it actually looks pretty good. They did show some gameplay, and I think that even if you're not a fan of Robocop, you can see that this game does indeed have some potential. It appears to be a first-person shooter. The graphics look really good, actually. It's atmospheric, and even the original actor, Peter Weller, will be reprising his role as Robocop. So, I mean, if you're a fan of the old movies, well, I'd say that it's definitely getting off to a good start here. It's interesting to me, though, because suddenly, these licensed movie-related IP are actually garnering real excitement. And that was not a thing 10 years ago. For such a long time, licensed IP, including these franchises, were more often than not all that great. That, though, has changed a lot here in recent years, as the game industry seems to have really figured out how to make these IP into good games. And hopefully, that continues on with Robocop Rogue City when it's planned to release sometime in 2023. Now, as for Terminator, they only gave us a brief teaser trailer for the moment, just to kind of let fans know that they are working on Terminator Survival Project. Not much else is really known at this time, though, but when we do start to hear more about it, of course, I'll let you all know as soon as possible. Let's go and take a look at the Famitsu charts, though, as they posted their weekly Japan sales numbers, and things continue to be really interesting over there. We'll kind of get back to that here in just a moment, but unsurprisingly, Nintendo continues to just absolutely dominate Japan on all fronts, with 9 of the 10 best-selling games for the week being Switch titles. As you can see here, Monster Hunter Rise plus Sunbreak, being the big new title, has already sold 104,000 units in Japan alone. It was actually revealed that Sunbreak has already eclipsed 2 million units worldwide in just 2 days, which is just absolutely crazy. Monster Hunter Rise in general has surpassed 10 million units worldwide, so Capcom, yeah, I'd say that they're probably pretty happy with not only Monster Hunter World doing well, but Monster Hunter Rise as well. The one game on this list, though, that's not a Nintendo game would be Gran Turismo 7 for the PlayStation 5, selling 8,000 units, bringing the total to 117,000 in that region. Then when you look at the hardware side of things, Nintendo sits at the top with 84,000 total units sold for the week. Again, that domination is a very real thing in Japan, but PlayStation, they had a pretty good week here as well, selling 24,000 units. Obviously, stock supply continues to be a big problem there, but one thing has become very evident. Xbox has had a bounce-back generation in Japan with yet another very solid week selling 12,500 consoles, bringing their total up to 260,000 lifetime in Japan. So the Xbox Series has now officially surpassed the 250,000 mark, and to put that into perspective, the Xbox One last generation sold a total of 114,000 units in Japan. So Xbox, they continue to do very well there, and it's starting to look like these numbers are by no accident. They are consistently putting up good numbers in Japan on a weekly basis. And one thing that was really interesting about this week specifically was the Xbox Series X to S split. The Series X did sell significantly more here, which goes to tell you that they got more supply for the week. That also tells you that supply is a factor in Japan for the Xbox Series X as well. Either way, though, big congrats to Xbox for reaching a new milestone here, and also to Nintendo, which just continues to be an absolute beast. Now, one rumor that we have consistently heard about over the last couple years is a supposed Switch Pro or even a Switch Successor. I mean, it really is just like clockwork by this point. A new rumor pops up every month about an imminent announcement, and then Nintendo, well, they do come out and they announce something, but it's not quite that Switch Pro announcement, and then everything just kind of restarts. We are living through that Groundhog Day right now, but one thing that we do know is that Nintendo, they are working on new hardware. All platform holders are always working on new hardware as they do prepare for the future. As to when these consoles will actually release, though, that's where things are a little bit more mysterious. However, we do have one major hint as to what Nintendo's looking to do with the Switch Successor, the Switch Pro, or whatever you want to call it. This has actually popped up a few different times, and once again, a new patent has surfaced online that shows Nintendo's continued interest in AI upscaling technology. Now, this is a very lengthy patent that was updated on July 5th of 2022, and in the technical overview, it states this. The technology described herein relates to machine learning and using machine learning to convert one dataset or signal into another dataset or signal. More particularly, the technology described herein relates to applying block transforms to such datasets or signal. Applications of the technology include converting images of one resolution into another resolution and may be used in real-time applications from images generated by, for example, a video game engine. Now, more or less, this appears to be some type of AI upscaling technology, which does lean into one very persistent thing that we've heard about this quote-unquote Switch Successor, and that it might be using NVIDIA DLSS 2.0. Nintendo does use NVIDIA-based hardware, so, I mean, they could partner up for their next device, and without even really knowing the specs, that alone could actually make for a pretty dramatic improvement. If you don't know what NVIDIA DLSS 2.0 is, it's probably the most exciting performance-based technology as of recent years. It is a legitimate game changer that not only can improve performance, but also picture quality. If Nintendo were to have a technology like this, suddenly games like Xenoblade 2, as an example, which runs at sub 720p on handheld, could be up-resed well beyond just 720p, giving it that more crisp picture. You can also say the same thing about performance. More Nintendo games would be capable of running at 60 frames per second with an AI upscaling technology like this. This is actually something that we talked about here recently with Xbox as they partnered up with AMD. Now that's the thing, because both PlayStation and Xbox, they use AMD-based hardware instead, so they don't have access to NVIDIA DLSS 2.0, but they can use AMD's equivalent being FSR 2.0. It's not quite as good as NVIDIA DLSS, but still it has yielded some very impressive results for AMD-based platforms, especially on something like the Steam Deck, where it can unlock better performance. So that's really why all this is just so exciting, because if Nintendo partners up with NVIDIA, which is the leader in AI upscaling technology, well then suddenly Nintendo, they can unlock better performance, and they can also unlock better picture quality. Of course though, this is all just a patent for the time being, so nothing is necessarily confirmed as of yet. And it's also important to note that NVIDIA is not necessarily specifically mentioned here either, but it does show you that Nintendo, they do have some interest in this type of technology, which seemingly fits with a lot of things that we've heard in recent years. I think if anything, there's a very good chance that we will see Nintendo incorporate some type of AI upscaling technology for their quote-unquote Switch successor. Let's go talk about PlayStation here for a moment though, because something very strange is occurring that's causing some concern around digitally owned titles. So what's happening here is that Sony Interactive Entertainment announced plans that they are removing 314 pieces of video content from the PlayStation Store and from users' video libraries. Now, this is only happening in Germany and Australia for the time being, but that means that if you purchased any of the content that's being delisted, it will be removed from your library despite you paying for it prior. You can actually take a look at their official statement here where they said, as of August 31st of 2022, due to our evolving licensing agreements with content providers, you will no longer be able to view your previously purchased Studio Canal content, and it will be removed from your video library. Now, this is rather concerning to say the least, especially in an increasingly digital-only world. Yeah, right now, this is just for movies on PlayStation, but games are kind of in that same boat here. Digital games have been increasing rapidly to the point that we now have digital-only consoles like the PlayStation 5 Digital and the Xbox Series S. There's always been that debate within the community that you don't actually own digital content, but rather you just own the access to that content. And that really does seem to be the case here. The fact that they can just simply take that content away from you because licensing agreements, that is certainly a major concern. Now, in the last few years, there's been a lot of talk about servers and what's going to happen 10 to 20 years down the road when these platform holders, they decide that they want to shut down their servers. That would mean that if you haven't downloaded your digital-based content, well, it's just goodbye forever. That's one of the reasons that fans have been just so frustrated with some of these store closures, like the 3DS eShop. That's closing sometime here soon. You also have Sony, where they were attempting to shut down the PlayStation 3 and Vita stores. That's when I pretty much decided that I'm not going to do digital content unless it's necessary. If I want to own a game, I'm going out and buying it physically, because situations like this. And even then, this here is just the whole new issue. This is because some type of licensing agreement, and it really does show you that these companies can take that content from you at any time. Whereas if you have physical media, well, even if there are disputes like this, I mean, it's not like Sony is going to come to your door and say, hey, yeah, we need that content back. So yeah, it is pretty easy to see why this is just so concerning, but let me know what you all think about all this, and also let me know if it's affected you or not. Again, this is only happening in Germany and Australia right now, but let me know if it's affected any of your purchased content. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, do you prefer E3 or the Summer Game Fest? And as you can see here, the vast majority of you all, being 80%, do prefer E3, while only 9% voted for the Summer Game Fest. And that is very, very telling on how bad Jeff Keighley has done with his specific Summer Game Fest showcase. Now, last year, he did have Elden Ring, which was pretty cool to see and everything. But this year, the Summer Game Fest showcase, I'm talking about that very specific showcase, was actually really bad. Now, I've said on this channel before that I'm not a big fan of Jeff Keighley's showcases, because I do find his showcases to be overly bloated. They just last way too long, the pacing is way off, and there's just too much advertising on top of that. I'm really not a big fan of his showcases, and this year's Summer Game Fest, I think, really made that evident for at least me. I think most people were not necessarily satisfied what he had to show there. Now, there were still a few good-looking games there, and we did talk about that on the channel, but as an entire showcase, Yeah, I don't think that it turned out well. I think out of all the big showcases, his by far was the weakest. I think PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo, they all put together some pretty good showcases. Capcom, I thought that theirs was pretty decent as well. And even Square Enix having that Final Fantasy event, they did a good job with that. So I do think that the Summer Game Fest event, it was by far the weakest. So I'm really not surprised by the results here. He's had a few years to kind of show what Summer Game Fest can be, and it's not really him that's making these so good. It's all the other showcases that are doing a good job. Whereas E3, I mean, once again, it's kind of up to each individual publisher to do a good job. But what E3 does is that it offers a physical location, those live crowds, and all of that. I mean, people can actually come and see these events live if they want to. It also is a little bit more condensed, taking place in a few days' time. So E3 has that element going on, whereas the Summer Game Fest, it doesn't have any of that, and so far his showcases have not really been a resounding success in terms of fan feedback. So yeah, I would say out of the two, E3 would definitely be the way to go, though I still do question whether or not these publishers will actually want to do E3 next year. I still think that right now is the biggest hurdle. I think that they might stick with the Summer Game Fest just because of that digital-only format, and it just being overall much more affordable. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.